When we hear the phrase iconic in watchmaking, we often will associate it with just one single model, not an entire collection. But the reality of things is that it's more of a collection that represents these names like Speedmaster, Black Bay, maybe looking at the Tank. All of these names represent a variety of models that help build the acclaim. So within these pockets of icons, there are watches within them that are underrated by comparison to the ones that are leading the pack. So what we're gonna be doing in this video is focus on those watches that are underrated by comparison to the iconic name associated with them. So in other words, underrated watches from iconic collections in the industry. Just to be clear, I want to classify underrated as being something that actually deserves acclaim. So we're not just picking some random watch that doesn't get talked about. I really want to believe in these watches deserving more praise than they actually receive. So that is my main consideration here, and they also have to follow the name configuration of the broader collection and model. And I really want to focus on icon. I want to be selective with this. These are from brands that are very well known in the industry. These are not going to be brands that are going to be fringe in terms of their popularity. No niche picks here. We really want to be selective here and only picking the brands that most people know about and those true icons of the industry. And before we jump into this video, if you've not seen the last couple of weeks, we've launched an unbelievable new aspect of our website on teddybaldassarre.com for new content, long form video content for teddybaldassarre.com subscribers. So what we've been really focusing on is creating content that can really live outside of the algorithm, stuff that goes in a little bit deeper. It isn't focused on maybe what YouTube maybe wants to recommend, but things that we just find to be really cool topics, and we want to make videos about them. So we have a variety of different videos that are releasing every single month on teddybaldassarre.com that you can only see there as a member. It's free to join. One of the cooler ones that we released lately is looking at behind the scenes of our business. I get so many questions about how do we produce videos for the channel? Who's helping you out behind the scenes? How do you set up your shots? What cameras do you use? How do you shoot the watches in your studio? We look at a lot of that. We look at how watches are fulfilled from our warehouse. We go to the store behind the scenes there. We also even had a video crew join us for one of our events in store, so you can see how that all operates, what goes into building out the displays for a pop-up environment. So if that sounds interesting to you, seeing more what happens at our business here and a lot more, check it out in the description for teddybaldassarre.com subscribers. It's free to join. Really would appreciate support in this, because this is something that we're really focused on going forward. Just wanting to create other content outside of what we do here. Nothing's gonna change here. We're gonna keep going with the content. This is just in addition to, and some content that can live outside of what typically works on YouTube. Okay, so to kick things off, I want to start with a brand that some might argue, oh man, Tudor Black Bay, is that really among the best when it comes to iconic names? I would say in the 21st century, this is one of the most important collections to come out in luxury watchmaking. And the reason I wanted to include this whole collection and this name is partially because of how this one collection within the broader collection of the Black Bay is so overlooked. We're talking about the Black Bay 1. Now, some of you might be thinking, what the hell is the Black Bay 1? And that would be a fair question, because until this year, we had no ability to classify this watch as anything other than just guessing. Some people would call this the Tudor Black Bay 36, which not really a good name, considering that it's also available in 41 millimeters, 39 millimeters, 31 millimeters. It doesn't make much sense to call it that, but that was the best we could come across. There was also another way that we could classify it as the non-diver Black Bays. I know that rolls off the tongue, but now these are called the Tudor Black Bay 1. And I think that's a reason why they are deserving to be on this list, because where they represent in the collection for the Black Bay, not really thought about as much as the dive watches, but I think if we had a name for them, we maybe give them a little bit more consideration. But let's just get on paper why I think these watches are so spectacular. You look at this $4,000 price point, this is that entry point into really getting into that luxury segment of watchmaking. I think every watch is a luxury purchase at around this time in this period of watch collecting. But I think this is where you start to see some separation happen when it comes to what is being presented, the brand cachet, and also some of the finishing standards. And I think Tudor represents that exceptionally. Now, the Black Bay 1 was really reinvented in 2023 when they started to expand out the MT calibers. You see some different dial colors that came into the fold after that. I love the way that these watches look. They've really elevated the presentation. If you look at the 5-link bracelet that comes with this, you get the MT caliber, 70 hours of power reserve, COSC certified movement. With that 5-link, you also are getting the T-Fit on the fly adjustment. These are about as complete of an everyday style watch around $4,000. And when I was bringing up that point earlier about getting into this segment of the market, a lot of people are looking for that one watch that can do it all. At $4,000, this might be, at the current point in 2025, the watch that can do it all better than almost any other at this range. Despite this, so many people go for the Black Bay 58, myself included. You can look at the likes of the 54, the standard Black Bay 41, or just the Black Bay that so many people talk about. But the Black Bay 1 now has a name and probably deserves more appreciation than it currently gets. So let's talk Speedmaster now. For the Speedmaster family, so much of the affiliation goes to the Moonwatch, the professional Moonwatch, and just watches that have this connection to space exploration. But let's remember, back in 1957, the CK2915 was first unveiled as a racing watch. It had the fixed tachymeter scale on the outside bezel. It really wasn't until Wally Schirra wore his CK2998 out into space that this started to shift the legacy, being known as more of this pioneer watch that is for space travel. And that's really something that's just been built off of the NASA Apollo program that came to follow in the 1960s. But I think where you look at some of these underrated pockets of the Speedmaster, it really is looking back to those original ideas. You could look at the 57, that's definitely an option, but my personal watch that I would recommend here as being the most underrated Speedmaster by far is the Speedmaster Super Racing. So why is this watch underrated in my opinion? Now let's zoom out. We have the whole concept of the racing lineage of the Speedmaster, but then the other aspect of the Speedmaster and Omega is just their pursuit of chronometry. Back in 1999, you had the coaxial caliber that was industrialized by Omega, purchasing it from Dr. George Daniels and acquiring that technology. 2015, master chronometer certification comes into the fold. Then 2023 comes out, and there was this quiet little release, and it was not something that Omega did a great job marketing, honestly. It was Spyrate. Now, Spyrate was first unveiled in the Super Racing, this exact watch. And the concept of Spyrate was unveiled in the caliber 9920. Basically, the whole point around Spyrate is to completely change the way a watch can be regulated and fine-tuned and adjusted in a way that's never been seen before. The two main ways that watchmakers are going to regulate a movement and adjust the rate are going to be through a regulating organ that will lengthen and shorten the hairspring, or you can also deal with inertia of the balance by shifting the weight of screws or weights on the balance itself that can adjust the rotation and the rate of the watch. What Spyrate does is a different approach. Now, it does include the screws on the balance that can be adjusted first. The way Spyrate is able to go a step further is through this small tuner adjuster that's on the balance assembly. What this is connected to is a silicon balance spring that is then adjusted with a flexible blade. And what that flexible blade can do is, depending on the pressure applied, it can add tension or compression to the spring, therefore either speeding up the oscillation of the balance wheel or slowing it down. And they do this without having to lengthen the hairspring or shorten the hairspring at all. And with that tuner, they're able to make adjustments to 0.1 second increments without having to disassemble the entire balance architecture, which is really a breakthrough. With this comes with a 0 to +2 seconds a day in accuracy. So if you're doing the math at home, that is twice as accurate as a master chronometer, all while getting the traditional upside of a master chronometer in the process. You get that 15,000 Gauss rating and all the other benefits that come with that fully cased up test. But with this ease of regulation and additional accuracy that comes into the fold, you get this honeycomb dial texture, sapphire construction for the case back as well as for the top crystal. You are getting a 4425 case, which wears like a 42 millimeter on wrist. I think the standard professional Moonwatch wears like a 40 millimeter on wrist, so just scale that out appropriately there. But where it currently sits at the time of recording this video, Spyrate only exists in one watch, and it is going to be the next breakthrough for Omega once they can scale this out to broader collections. I don't know where the future will be exactly, if this is going to be in all their watches, but in their pursuit of chronometry, this is one of the most important steps in the last 25 years. And where can you get it? Just in this watch. Hence why I think it's very underrated. Now there's one other Omega collection I think we have to mention here, and that is the Seamaster. So much of the last 30 years of the Seamaster has been dominated by the Diver 300. The Diver 300M is the watch that is so affiliated with James Bond, and in the 1990s when that watch was released, it has now become the best seller for Omega, even outselling the Speedmaster Professional. The Diver 300 is the #1 selling collection, at least in the United States, which is pretty crazy to think about because so much acclaim goes to the Speedmaster. So the first Omega dive watch was a follow-up to an original dress watch using the name from 1948, but the trilogy edition of the Seamaster 300 is really where we started to see this shift for the entire line of the Seamaster. And originally, when you look back to the original design identity of that original Seamaster 300 CK2913 from 1957, I think the watch that represents the underrated part of the Seamaster collection, you talk Planet Ocean, I think it's the Seamaster 300 though, just because of the history, where it represents in the catalog. It's very distinct and it informed much of the design identity of so many other dive watches there to follow. I think this is the watch to me that has a little bit more of this iconic status. And there's some other traits that come to the table that I think allow it to separate and be its own thing. You have the sandwich style construction, no date, also getting a master chronometer certification, but getting the 8900 movements on the inside. So that's an elevated movement from Omega. So that's getting 60 hours of power reserve, dual barrels for improved consistency of the mainspring torque and balance power. So that's really where they're getting that extra benefit with the additional barrel, not really the power reserve. You're only getting 5 hours of power reserve difference between those two, this and the 8800 series. Another aspect I love about these watches is how incredibly useful the 8900 series movements are for when you're traveling. So you have that independent adjustable hour hand. This might be me just because I travel so much. I know there's other people out there that don't have to worry about this as frequently as I do, but I like having this feature, especially when combined with a no date function. I think it's a no-brainer at that point. 300 meters of water resistance, so still exceptional on that front. Dome sapphire crystal. These watches just look the part, and I think they are some of the less talked about too from a production standpoint, because there are so many different configurations of the Planet Ocean at this point, so many different configurations of the Diver 300. Seamaster 300, not really that many to choose from, and I think that level of scarcity has created also an appreciation that comes with these maybe not being as thought about as frequently. So now let's talk Cartier Tank. So what is the Cartier Tank that deserves a little more credit? So the Cartier Tank Louis, I think rightfully rated. You look at the Musk Cartiers, rightfully rated. I think this would be my choice. This is the Cartier Tank American Large Edition. So the American was first unveiled in 1989. It was inspired deeply by a 1921 tank model known as the Centre. The tank upholds very familiar characteristics. At the time of its release, it was boundary pushing. It wasn't like many other watches of the era, but now we've just taken it for granted for being this standardized idea when it's really, at the time, a very boundary pushing concept that just became popular because of its iconic status. So this is gonna be more underrated because of that elongated curved case profile that's being presented by the American. It was redesigned in 2023. In some cases, it's more elegant in its ability to shape to your wrist. It might be a little larger on the wrist as a byproduct of that. But all the familiar hits that come with a Cartier Tank are still here. You get the Roman numeral dial indications, the hidden signature at 7, blued hands, blue cabochon jewel on the crown, sapphire crystal, reptilian strap, great dimensions, and quite slim. And it features the automatic 1899 MC movement. So this is basically positioned between some of those entry-level Musk Cartiers and then getting into the Cartier Tank Louis. So nice little pocket, and I think that's another reason why it's probably underrated in my opinion. So the Rolex Submariner, I struggled with this one quite a bit because there's no definitive Rolex Submariner that stands out. as like the main one that might differentiate from the rest of the crowd, because all of them are appropriately rated to some degree. One thing that I used as a guide though was looking at a Rolex tournament, which should be out by the time of posting this video. That was a 250 plus watch tournament that we ran. So there was a 64 watch that made the final field, but we broke it down from a start of 250. Among those watches that made the final cut for the final 64, there were some Submariners. The Submariner date slightly was behind that of the traditional Submariner. So the Submariner overall was third in the rankings in the final 64. So it was one of the most popular watches chosen, no surprise there. Right behind it was the Submariner date at the 5 position. How they proceeded with the tournament, that's a different story, so you'd have to go watch that video to check that out. Then you had the sub-date models also making more appearances with the Starbucks and the Cookie Monster. Those were both 3 seeds in the tournament, so they're relatively higher up in position. But then there was one watch that stood out when you looked at the whole range. It was more middle of the pack. It was an 8 seed, but it's a watch that so many people know. It's a nickname that so many people can recognize. It goes by the Bluesy. And for that, we're looking at the 126613LB. I think this might be the most underrated Rolex in what it represents for the collection and how people affiliate with it. I think it was one of the first sports watches to really showcase what two-tone was all about. Now, the Bluesy didn't come out until 1988, but the two-tone Submariner came out in 1984 with the 16803 reference. And I think that was a point in time where you saw a lot of design interest changing. Two-tone certainly was a thing in this period, but I think the 80s were a great time for two-tone, and it hasn't fully faded. Now, two-tone has come into favor more during certain pockets of time and then fallen out of favor. I would say now is a pro two-tone type of era that we're in right now. And I think the first watch that comes to mind when thinking about two-tone, it's the Bluesy. That's for me what comes to mind first. Now with this latest generation, you're getting a 41mm case, 300 meters of water resistance. You're getting the 32-35 caliber on the inside with the Chrono-G escapement, glide lock clasp. The thing I like about what this watch does is it gives you a window into the precious metal game without going too far into that direction where it prices itself out. You're still under $20,000. It's $17,600 at retail. And you're getting some of the benefit with some of the up materials that comes with the bezel, as well as getting that glide lock in the clasp. It's a nice middle ground of luxury opulence while not forgetting the history and past of the Rolex Submariner. Now we shift to another Rolex model, and I just want to specify that if I didn't think there was a Rolex model, and Rolex specifically, that was not properly rated, I just skipped the entire collection. I think every GMT Master 2 that exists is properly rated, so that's why you're not going to see that collection here. So I just want to make that as a point, because you might be asking, why aren't there more Rolex models on this list? That's the reason why. Rolex just gets so much appreciation already that I think you'd be stretching to say that these are not appreciated. So I really wanted to look at those watches that I think deserve a little bit more attention. For this, we're going to the Explorer family. There's a couple you could maybe consider. One might bring up the Explorer 2 in a black dial, maybe fall short of that of the Polar in popularity. But I don't really believe in that. I think Polar all the way. So let's maybe shift over to the Explorer 36mm. Let's go for the two-tone model. And the reason why I'm going there is not to say that I think this would be my choice for the Explorer. I think it's better in stainless steel personally, but I think people are quite hard on this watch. And when it was first unveiled, there was like picketing, like level stuff happening in the watch enthusiast crowd. You couldn't dare accept the idea the Explorer could be this two-tone watch, which is pretty funny because we accept two-tone in almost every other Rolex collection, not having an issue with it. But once we got into the purity of the Explorer, that's where we started to have an issue. So I'm looking here at the 124273. You are pricing yourself up to a higher degree for especially an Explorer at above $13,000. These are not ones that are trading above retail either. So I think that's another point to say that maybe these are slightly overlooked. These are never gonna be the most popular Explorer models, but maybe do they deserve more appreciation or honestly just less hate than they get? I think that is absolutely the case. These are the most coveted luxury field watches on the market, and to think that there can't exist a luxury embellishment of two-tone in the process, I think is pretty silly. These work as dress watches. These work as being more tool-oriented watches. Maybe not as much in two-tone, I get you, but these deserve, I think, some more appreciation. There's still so much to like about these. You have the 3230 caliber on the inside, 70 hours of power reserve, have different case options to choose from here, which I think has really elevated the Explorer range. But it's really weird too, because if you look at just the Explorer, how much it dominates the discourse for watch enthusiasts versus what actually happens in the broader market of Rolex, what are the most popular models? This is one of the worst selling professional series watches from Rolex. People don't sign up to want to be on the wait list for an Explorer as much as they do other watches. When you're trying to think of maybe that one single Rolex to own, the Explorer is right there near the top. And the two-tone might be a bit of a stretch, but I think just the Explorer in general doesn't get enough appreciation, and then the Explorer two-tone would be one that I don't think deserves hate. And I think right now it gets more hate than it probably should. So if you had to pick one collection from Breitling that deserves to be on this list, it's the Navitimer. And the Navitimer has now expanded to include some different collections. You had the standard three-hand models that were available, different case sizes to choose from at 41 millimeters, 43 millimeters, and 46 millimeters. I think the chronograph Navitimers are properly rated. That's not where I'm gonna go here. Where I want to focus on is the GMT models at 41 millimeters. These are the ones that stand out to me as being, relatively speaking, underrated. So these come with a 41 millimeter diameter, lug to lug of 46.86 millimeters, which is a point I want to bring up about all Navitimers. They wear much smaller than their size and diameter might indicate. This wears like a 39.5 to 40 millimeter watch on case. I mean, this is a thinner lug-to-lug dimension here that I'm talking about than a Hamilton Khaki Field Mechanical, which is 38 millimeters. I think one of the challenges with these watches is going to be the GMT movement on the inside. You're not getting a in-house or manufacturer caliber, but it's still a very serviceable caliber using a Sellita base. The other thing I could see happening here in the future is maybe something with the B31, as they've now developed that, there being additional complications that can come off of that structure of the B31. So I could see that changing, but nevertheless, these are beautiful watches. I think this has feelings of the larger scale that comes with the chronograph. My challenge with some of the standard three-hand Navitimers is they feel like they're stripping away the identity of the Navitimer. The GMT feels authentic. There's an authenticity to what is being presented here, but it's not talked about as much as what is being presented with the chronograph versions. Also, another thing that I think is nice about the Navitimer is they don't showcase this. This is not something that Breitling markets in their watches. I mean, I'm wearing a pistachio right now, and you can't even tell, and they would never even, like, you wouldn't even know unless you really knew that this was a chronometer certified watch. You still get the slide rule, you get a GMT complication on top of it, Navitimer style, beautiful finishing, and choice of either bracelet or alligator strap. So Seiko, what is the Seiko watch that I think is underrated? Now there's a couple watches you could mention. I was looking mostly at the Prospect series because the Prospects, the Divers, the Alpinist, that was where I felt like we could do some digging and identify one single watch. There was the thought of the SPB 453, that was one of the thoughts, but since that has come out, I think a lot of attention has shifted that way. I want to focus on an Alpinist model, and I think the Alpinist models collectively, so much of the attention goes in one direction, and that is the SPB 121, that some of the other picks glossed over entirely. And I will admit defeat on this one. I totally overlooked this watch for a long period of time because of where it's positioned in the Seiko catalog. You have Seiko and then you have Seiko Luxe. They're two different collections, and the Alpinist is basically right in the middle. Some of the Alpinist models fit in the conventional Seiko catalog, some go in the Luxe. Don't ask me why this is the case, it's just a weird cutoff. I think they just include the SPB 121 just because it is so popular in the standard collection, just because so many people want to see it. But there's a model that is priced basically right on par with the SPB 121, but it's in Luxe. And it's also probably the most versatile Alpinist you can get. So this is my choice. This is the SPB 117. I overlooked this watch for a long time. This is a piece that if on paper you're looking for an everyday watch from Seiko or beyond, or you like the Alpinist, this is probably the watch for you. This is gonna go head to head with things like the Hamilton Khaki Field Murph. It does have its quirks. It does have some weird things coming to the table. It has the compass bezel. It has the 2 crowns. It has the Cyclops. But some of the other features are not going to be there. You don't have the numerals on the dial. It doesn't have the gilt markings. Still getting that 39.5 millimeter case, thickness at just over 13 millimeters, 46.4 millimeters on that lug to lug, and a water resistance rating of 200 meters still with that 6R35 on the inside. So many people love talking about the SPB121. I love that watch. It has personality, it has quirks. I think that is why when you're looking under $1,000, it does so well. It is one of the most popular Seiko models because character is something that is often omitted in watches under 1,000. It's really more of this mall watch design. There's no character. There's nothing that's being brought forth with its identity that differentiates from other watches in this segment. That is why the SPB121 does so well. That is why the previous JDM model, the SARB 017, did so well. But this 117, really cool. And there are points about how it's enhanced. It's going to be more versatile. It also has a dial color that's easier to pull off in a variety of environments. And it's one that I've overlooked and I'm going to stop overlooking it. I think this is one of the most complete Seiko watches out there and easily the most underrated Alpinist given how much is being brought to the table when it comes to its versatility and upside. So the iconic collection from IWC, they have multiple. The Ingenieur is iconic. The Portugueser is iconic. But I think the one that leads the way is their Pilot watches. The Pilot watches that dominate, it's usually the big Pilot. It is the Mark 20. The one that gets the shorter end of the stick, in my eyes, is the 41 millimeter models from the Pilot series. That is both with the 3-handers, but also the chronographs. And that's where I want to go because I think the chronographs represent the area that probably deserves the most credit compared to what it actually gets. So let's zoom out and talk about what is generally available at the price range of this watch. 41 millimeters Pilot chronograph from IWC. You have the history of their Pilot design language going back to the 1930s and 40s. But then you also have in 1994 being one of these leaders of chronograph designs and what is being brought forth by their split-second chronographs. You also had the Pilot series that was brought forth in this period in 1994 where this Pilot chronograph really took off. But getting into the subject here around what is else out there, this is right around $8,000 for stainless steel at the time of recording this video. Tariffs could change this very quickly. But think about it. Breitling, with what's being presented with their watches, going to sit above this in price. The Omega Speedmaster Professional now sits above this in price unless you're talking about the Hezolite version, but the Sapphire Sandwich is priced ahead of this watch. Zenith, going to be way more expensive with their Chronomaster series. My point here is if you look at the icons of chronograph design, this is towards the entry point of getting into this segment and tier of luxury chronograph while still having so much Pilot DNA. If you want to get a Pilot chronograph that has more of this Flieger design, where are you looking? And where's there a brand that has as much history and acclaim in this category than IWC? If you like this style, this is the one to go for. And I think it's overlooked by so many people. Reasonable dimensions too, 41 millimeters for the diameter, 14.5 millimeters in thickness, 51.8 millimeter lug to lug, so a little bit longer on that point. Also getting 100 meters of water resistance. A lot of the watches I mentioned so far on that list are gonna fall short of that number as well. So having some more sport upside. Legibility is fantastic. Automatic helm wheel chronograph movement on the inside, horizontal clutch. This is the 69385. Getting you 46 hours of power reserve in the process. And let's also talk about just the different case options that you have available too. You have steel, you have bronze, you have ceramic, and you have ceratanium too, as well as gold options if you want to go that route. And not even getting into the bracelets. I think these are some of the best bracelets in their price segment. You have easy swapping for straps, but also with this bracelet adjustment system with that button in the clasp, I think it's one of the best on-the-fly adjustment systems in the entire industry. Now for our final watch on this list, we're going to look at JLC with the Reverso. The Reverso has been updated a lot. A lot of the design identity has shifted to the Tribute series, so more of the pure form of what was thought in those early days and having more classical type of approaches to the Reverso. But my favorite, and I think the most underrated, relatively speaking, in the pocket of where can you find additional value, intrigue, it comes with the duo face, the Tribute duo face small seconds. This is that entry point into the duo face family. So you're paying a bit more money, and by a bit, I mean it is going to be thousands of dollars more, but $13,000 getting a watch produced by JLC in-house, a Reverso, with 2 separate faces on it, or 2 different dials on it, however you want to classify it. These are gonna be a little bit larger, so 47 millimeters on that lug-to-lug end, but you're getting a manual caliber 854A-2. This comes with, one has the traditional small seconds on one side, but then on the reverse side has a 12-hour display with an additional display for that AM, PM, and then a trigger on the inside of that central body of the case that is going to allow you to adjust that hour hand in 1 hour increments. It's basically giving you either 2 ways to view the time, or what you could do is use this as a travel watch. One is going to be your home time, one is going to be your travel time. And they don't market it as this, but I love this added benefit that comes with these designs. They're beautifully finished, impeccably finished for this price range. The Duoface was first available in 1994. It did come with this larger case size, but this feature of having 2 separate identities with a singular watch at this prices, it's a 2-for-1 deal. That's the cool aspect about the Duoface. It has personality, it has beauty, and it's complicated for what it is. The caliber speaking, being produced in the Valley de Joux, but also the case itself having more than 50 components as part of its package. That's a talking point for all the Reversos, but when you add that on top of what is being presented with the Duoface, I think it is an absolute winner in the Reverso catalog. But all right, guys, that is our video here today, looking at some underrated watches in the middle of iconic collections and falling underneath iconic names in watchmaking. If you enjoyed this video, please give this one a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell icon, really do appreciate that. Is there a watch that I identified for one of these major collections that you disagree with, or do you agree with my picks? Leave some comments down below. Is there another watch that is iconic in your eyes, and is there one model underneath that iconic umbrella that deserves more attention? Leave a comment as well about that. Also, definitely check out TeddyBaldassarre.com. TeddyBaldassarre.com is an authorized dealer for more than 30 brands. Every purchase from our website comes with quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. In addition, every purchase from our website helps us continuing to produce content here. It allows us to invest back into what we're producing on a weekly basis. So if you are in the market for a watch, we'd absolutely be thrilled to have your business because it allows us to keep doing what we're doing here. We love what we do. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.